marketing has shifted drastically in the last 10 years. If we were talking about programmatic in the state of 10 years ago, it's so different than what it is now. It's no longer about demographics. It never really was to begin with, but that was like the easy entry point into this. So what happens is a lot of wasted ad dollars and ad space to people who were never going to consider it before because it's actually not in their lifestyle. Your end goal is you want that person to think about you without seeing the ad. AI, I believe, should be used to help people. It should not be used as like to solve every single problem. It should help you find and identify the problem and then use your human aspect to it to solve that problem. Let your audience tell you what they're into. Don't tell them what they're into.
Well, hello and welcome back to the AdTech Heroes podcast. I am your host, Jon Wallett, and we have an exciting episode today. We're going to be diving into the topic of how cultural identity, behavior, and of course AI are reshaping the way that brands connect with their audiences and consumers. And I am extremely delighted because I have a friend on the podcast today. I'm joined by Alyssa Collier, who is the performance marketing manager at Etsy. And Alyssa and I go back a couple of years now, and she is very much a jack of all trades, not just an expert marketing professional, not just a great friend, but also a podcast host of her own in her own right. So I'm really excited to dig in. Alyssa, how are we doing today?
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's been a long time coming and excited to get into all things culture. There is so much happening in the world right now from a culture standpoint. I mean, got the Olympics going on right now. I feel like it's the big hot topic everywhere, and especially in my own podcast world, which is a figure skating based podcast. So I am living and eating up all the Olympic figure skating content.
Yeah, this is your time. I feel like you're just soaking it all in, right?
Absolutely. I've had Olympic streams going on in the background every day, tuning into everything that's happening. And has it been an interesting time?
It's been wild. Outside of figure skating, obviously that hits home for you. What other events or sports have you been gravitating towards?
I mean, most recently at the time of this recording is the Super Bowl. I feel like it was the Bad Bunny concert, and that was just everything incredible. And I mean, as marketers, our Super Bowl is always the commercials. And I don't know how you felt about it, but I felt like a lot of them fell really flat. They were just not, there was so much hype for what the commercials could have been this year. And the conversations have been, they've either fell really flat. They were really AI driven. A lot of them were created by different AI creatives, and it kind of just lost some of the like humanness of it. And what a lot of those were, like one of the big standouts was Coinbase and their whole karaoke style. Everybody wanted it to be Backstreet Boys, the full lyrics, and then you get to like that one part and it says on the screen, "Am I so secure?" No, you're not secure anymore. That's not what this should be.
Yeah, that felt like a big psych out. And I feel like Coinbase has been known to do things like that. Remember they had that one, was it last year, the year before that, where the screen went dark? Was it Coinbase that it made it look like your electricity went out? So I get it. You're grabbing attention, you get leaned in audience, but they missed the mark for me on that one in particular. I felt, you're kind of sitting through it, you kind of sing along, you're like, where are we going with this? And you're hoping the payoff is going to be something related to the Backstreet Boys too. You're like, oh, are they doing a new album? And then all of a sudden it kicks in. You're like, okay.
Like, okay, great.
Sure. I also felt that the 90s nostalgia thing is coming in real hot. Advertisers are just like, we're going to tap that nerve as much as possible because they know, that generation's come of age, right? So the disposable income, the purchase power, it's all there. And I'm obviously part of that era. But I don't know. I thought sometimes it resonates for me and sometimes it really doesn't. So, and it was an interesting.
Look at T-Mobile. T-Mobile really tried to do
example.
it, and it was like half there. It was like, yes, you have more points than Coinbase. Love you for this, but also it felt very forced. It felt very celebrity endorsement. I mean, that was the other half of the commercials. If they weren't rooted in AI, they were very much like, let's put every celebrity, every influencer we can and call it the culture. And that's just not it.
Oh man, we're gonna have a good chat today. I love it. I love that we just kick things off right away with that because it's so
Immediately.
like you said, it's like of the moment, it's on par. And the last thing I'll say is to your point, it did feel very inorganic with the way that AI was used for a lot of the ads. I've been hearing a lot of criticism that years ago crypto was the big advertiser at the Super Bowl, and kind of look how that panned out, right? So there's worries that that's going to be a similar track record with some of the AI advertising that went on.
There was a quote I saw too with the most recent ads that the Super Bowl essentially tells you how the market is going, and what we see a lot happen year over year. The ads that have the most prevalence in the Super Bowl are at the top of their game, and they won't ever reach another top. Like, this is kind of it for them. And it was so true with all the AI ads. I mean, even one ad, the Claude ad, that was such a big dig towards ChatGPT this year, was such a good indication of that. And it's kind of the same thing happening with all the other crypto companies, all the other AI companies when it comes to that. They've hit their peak, and it almost feels like it's too all consuming, especially from like the marketing lens of, why did we have to have 50% of commercials that were not rooted in human creativity or humans creating things for human? I mean, you saw and felt the disconnect from it. And I know we're going to get into it. I'm already going to plug him already, but there's a book that has altered my brain chemistry when it comes to marketing. It's For the Culture by Dr. Marcus Collins. And one of the most powerful things he says in the beginning of the book is that we as marketers are shaping behavior. We are shaping how people think and act, what they're buying, who they buy it from. And that's really powerful. So when you have these ads that they feel like they're falling flat, but this is what people are telling us, or at least what brands are telling us, where we should be buying, where we should be spending our time, it becomes really difficult to comprehend the so what. Like, what do I do with this now? Like, AI, sure, I can use ChatGPT to help with whatever it may be, and I can use Claude, and I can go to Coinbase and buy whatever cryptocurrencies I want to buy, but there's a big gap, and it's really hard to understand why that gap exists when the people who are telling us what to do created that gap.
Right. Yeah, and not to plug CTAG, that's not what this podcast is about, but we've been thinking a lot about that too, and how do we use the power of these technologies to find a way to bridge that gap. And one of the things that we've been leaning into heavily is emotional connection. How do we understand that? And I think back to all the cultural moments in advertising as I grew up, and the impact it had on me and my psyche and my purchasing behavior. For me, it was that one particular beverage brand during the holidays who had polar bears included in their experience. Like, that was a connection I made, an emotional connection that I think still resonates with me to this day. So yeah, I think I'm reading what you're writing, and we're on the same page on a lot of this stuff. And I'm very curious to dig in further about your thoughts on Dr. Marcus Collins's book. So we're going to definitely have some time to dig there. But let me also backtrack. So a lot of the way we start the podcast, I know we talked about, is because it's all about people in ad tech as heroes. You are the featured hero today. I want to start a little bit with you. I want to talk a little about your career journey, in your role at Etsy. What does that day look like? And how did you get here? How did we get to this Alyssa of today?
Yeah, it's funny. 2026 marks a full decade of me being in marketing, and it still feels wild because I feel like I just started, but also it's felt like 20 years at the same time. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago what I'd be doing, I would have said you're crazy, because I started in TV, I started sales side, I started very opposite to what most people's marketing journeys are. I had really connected with a lot of, like, when I was younger, lots of late night TV, and I really thought my big dream was to work in late night. Didn't know what that meant, but wanted to be like Tonight Show, Conan O'Brien when he had his show going on, Jimmy Kimmel when James Corden had his show as well. And I was so intrigued with how brands were integrated in those shows, because that's how I was starting to remember things. That's how I would remember what movie to go watch because that celebrity from that film was featured on there, or which artist to listen to. SNL was a massive influence on me growing up, specifically the Weekend Update. I mean, it wasn't just where I got my news, but it was where I understood what brands and what like things to lean into. It was creating and defining culture. I mean, look at like carpool karaoke, which is still, James Corden's show doesn't exist anymore, but it's still probably one of the most biggest culture conversations today. And there's videos that circulate all around YouTube for that. Everywhere. So I thought I was going to have this career in TV, came to New York, started just that, was in TV sales, very quickly learned, don't think TV's for me, but I'm glad that we tried this. And I made the jump over to the agency side and made the jump into digital. It's where you and I met our time when I was over at Hearts and Science, and really got to learn everything and anything that was programmatic, and that was ad tech, and that was pretty much the foundation for my entire career was working there. And being able to take that to so many different massive brands. I had spent time working on the Target account. I had spent time working with Hilton as well. And now being brand side at Etsy, it's been such a full circle moment. I feel like I've touched every piece of digital, from partnerships to programmatic to TV to audio to podcasting to now in paid social and everywhere. So I've seen this full journey of what does actually ad tech look like? How do we leverage it for brands in the right emotional ways and in the human ways, which is so on brand as to Etsy and our entire mantra of keeping commerce human, to now in the paid social lens and into, most importantly, the culture lens. Marketing has shifted drastically in the last 10 years. If we were talking about programmatic in the state of 10 years ago, it's so different than what it is now. We are having to find people really differently. It's no longer about demographics. It never really was to begin with, but that was like the easy entry point into this. Now you've got generations where the demographics are so vastly different. And I think one of my favorite examples we were talking about before this was there was an example of like comparing Ozzy Osbourne to King Charles. It's probably one of my most favorite examples of like, you can go after somebody who is a male, they've got kids, they are living in the UK, they have this household income, and they live in this specific region, they're this age, I want to target them. And the example showed like you were basically describing two vastly different people with vastly different interests, and you're targeting them with something that likely may not resonate with them because of their actual culture and their identity and their interests, but you were going after them so demographically based. I mean, that's how so much in like the TV world was focused. And now we're shifting to what are people watching? What are they listening to? Who are their influences, especially on social and the rise of influencers? I mean, 10 years ago, influencer wasn't even like a term that we were using. You were seeing like personalities and you were seeing people create content. Content creation was like at its culmination. I mean, I remember the days of like Jenna Marbles on YouTube, and she was one of the biggest, I know, big throwback. And like, I remember watching all of hers on YouTube and Vine when Vine was in existence. It's been such a massive shift. So for
Bro,
me,
you're hitting my nostalgia button. Vine. Oh my god. How many was it? 6 seconds or 10 seconds? How many seconds did they give you to
six
actually?
seconds, you had 6 seconds to make it count. And so marketing has just been it's been all around me in so many different ways, and I was trying to like figure out for the last 10 years what is it that I want to do when it comes to it. And so much of it is culture influence, so much of it is rooted in, and it's why I'm here at Etsy now, rooted in human connection. It's being able to surface the things that matter most to people in the places and spaces that matter most to them. And how I do it changes every year. That's kind of the beauty of marketing. It's always going to be dynamic, but it's been the most incredible journey.
So, yeah, and I think your view of your no, not just your experience, but kind of how you think about your consumer and your target audience is unique in the sense that I think you're one of the marketers I've spoken to that really gets it. That's like, okay, that demographic footprint doesn't say everything at all the time. So, how did you re-engineer some of that focus, at Etsy, but also in the way you think as a marketer? That there's a variance of different audience behaviors, and how do you think about like the types of interactions with content that you should be leaning into with consumers? And what I'm leaning into and kind of leading the witness here a little bit is like, there's always that talk about brand safety and all that stuff, but nowadays I feel like that conversation has shifted so much. Like because a lot of things that are culturally impacting us right now may not be brand safe and things like that. So I know I'm kind of switching gears a little bit here, but I'd love to hear your take on that, how like that specific audience behavior with content consumption has changed the way that you look at like traditional demographic targeting, stuff like
Been
that.
generational changes. I mean, what Gen Z deems as culturally acceptable is very different than Gen X and the boomer generations, and the millennials were kind of like, we'll figure it out as we go. And it took them a long time to say like what is culturally acceptable and what's not. I mean, you think about, I remember all of the Got Milk campaigns, and that was like considered a big like culture moment in the sense that like it was taking your favorite celebrities and athletes and telling people to drink their milk because it was going to have strong bones and strong things like that. And that was one of the best examples of like spanning generations of like, this is brand safe, this is what we like to do. Then come like early 2000s, 2010s, and all of that gets thrown out the window with world events and how people are shaping things, the rise of the internet, the rise of social media. People all of a sudden had voices that they never knew they had before. It was always there, but there was never a space to create that. And especially in like the rise of influencers, it's changed the game so much. So many people found their quirks to be more centralized and more modernized. And it was these shared feelings of like, wow, you have that too. Like there's a one funny one I always see every now and then. It's got to do with like a freckle on a wrist. And I always see these videos of like, did you know you have this freckle on like the center of your wrist or like in this specific place? And it goes viral every so few months or now with like hundreds of thousands of likes. And people have this shared experience and feelings of like, yeah, I do that too. And then it becomes about like people's behaviors like, oh, do you have the same moment after work and you sit in your car and you just sit there for 20 minutes listening to some music before you actually go inside your home? And it's these shared experience and behaviors that have really changed how we approach marketing. You can't just show someone an ad to say, you should buy this because of this. Now people want to know why. Why do I need to buy that? Why do I need to experience that when it's not necessarily aligned with what I do and what my lifestyle is? I'll use myself as like an example here. I'm a millennial. I am married. I don't have children. So by a lot of demographics, I also live in New York City. So I'm very into city life. But if you were to take my demographics, you would just see someone who's married, no children, in a dual income household. There would be a lot of assumptions for what I should like or where I should be going in my life journey. I should be thinking about the suburbs. I should be thinking about buying a home. And so ads, and I've seen it in my day to day, are shaped that way. I see car ads all the time. I'm not going to buy a car in Manhattan. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to buy car insurance. I'm not going to get a mortgage for a home anytime soon. It's just not my lifestyle. And so what happens is a lot of wasted ad dollars and ad space to people who were never going to consider it before because it's actually not in their lifestyle. What I do want to see are things about travel. I want to see things around, you see my background here, vinyl records. I'm in a huge like nostalgia record vinyl collection right now because that's been so big for me. I want to see things that are in the music scene. And if people lean into what those interests are, it's where the magic happens and it's where the actual brand relevance and most importantly, unprompted awareness happen. I think a lot of brands forget about that your end goal is you want that person to think about you without seeing the ad. It's one of our big challenges with Etsy, right? Everybody thinks Amazon, they think Target first. And one of our marketing challenges is getting people to think of us when we're not in your face and we're not in your feeds. We want to have enough brand messaging out there and be in those right culture moments.
I
Some really
love
good,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
So keep going.
There's,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
yeah, no, you're good. There's been some really good examples of that. More of lately, we've had some really good brand campaigns that have really delivered on that last holiday season. We had some really good messages that really tied into some of those like shared experiences. There was a whole campaign that was centered around like it was one was a couple who their son was in school and playing the drums and the teacher saw they wanted to play the drums for some reason they weren't doing it, and so she came to Etsy to buy these personalized drumsticks and a little case to give as a Christmas gift. And in that same environment, in that same school that kid was in, there was a crossing guard who had a dog. It was winter, the dog was cold. The students came together, came to Etsy and bought a sweater that was personalized with the dog's name to give to the crossing guard so their dog could be out with them all the time. And it's these little moments and these little shared experiences that people think of, and it's very much rooted in who we are, that we want to make the little things feel really special because it's not just about the big moments. And I think I'm rambling, but sometimes in culture, we always think about the big moments. We started the top of this with the Super Bowl, massive, massive moment. Um, and it, should be a place where marketers feel like they can go to. What about some of these other smaller sports moments? What about like the NBA Cup? That happens every year. It's a whole new moment for people. What about all-star games? What about like the off season for various sports? What about the World Cup, which like very massive, but for the US, not necessarily as massive. And so it's finding where your people are at in their interests versus just going off that demographic.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the stories you shared. Because it gets down to the heart of what I think I've noticed through all the conversations I've been having on this podcast, which is the human element is like really core still to everything that we do. But at the same time, the obvious elephant in the room is AI, and every brand marketer, every company, including CTAG, is utilizing some form of it. So I want to pivot a little bit, but it's still keep it in the vein of what we're talking about, where how do we tap into these real-time moments that matter and amplify that in a certain way to make sure that we're giving consumers what they want and respecting them at the same time. Can you talk a little bit how you guys over at Etsy, how you're utilizing AI to kind of help understand some of those audience habits, and get deeper with those cultural contexts?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe, should be used to help people. It should not be used as like to solve every single problem. It should help you find and identify the problem and then use your human aspect to it to solve that problem. So a lot of our challenges are we have such a wide category of products. Like if you go into like the home and jewelry sections of our site, and I'll even start with jewelry, you can have people shopping for earrings, or now, as of lately, one of the biggest things, people are shopping for engagement rings on Etsy and now are shifting to online versions of that. We wouldn't have known that had it not been for different AI models telling us where these trends are shifting to and what people are actually shopping and buying for. I think and to plug Seed Tag a little bit, one of the cool features around Liz, for example, is it tells you where your audience is in those places that you wouldn't think otherwise. And I think that is the most beneficial way that we can use it, because there's a lot of known places and a lot of known challenges. I want to use AI in my marketing strategies to figure out the unknowns. And there's so many places that we're not even thinking about when it comes to culture. There's with engagement rings, right? There's always engagement season, there's wedding season, there's things like that. But what about some of like the people that are eloping or not in these like big celebratory moments of life? How do you still plug into that and find where they're at without it being so showy and so like mainstream almost? It's finding these niche moments, and that's where AI can really help us. It can really help identify trends before they even become trends. Trying to think of a few other examples. There's so many that are out there, but I think where we've really capitalized on using AI into the strategies is finding those unknown points that we're not even thinking about.
Right, right. And then that goes back to some earlier conversation we had about, product fed curation, right? It's like, how do you identify, um, what products they're into? How do you amplify products that they could be into, and so on and so forth? How have you has seen that making that customer experience more relevant and effective for your brand?
Yeah, it's the ongoing challenge we have is product matching, product curation, both from the offsite and the on-site experience. And obviously, the more people that use Etsy and that purchase from Etsy, we have that data, and our AI models are really great at training to understand what they're actually searching for. The challenge for us is, and I think for anyone in the e-commerce space, is the new buyer lens and getting people to make their first purchase and figuring out what is it that's going to make somebody come to us over somebody else for that first purchase, whatever that may be. Can we find them in a shopping mission? Can we find them in a point of culture? One pretty notable example of this was where we leaned into some nods towards heated rivalry and what was going on. We had so many products that were surfaced in the show, and we decided to create different product collections and curations, both on site and off site. It was called Cottage Core, and it was these like really subtle nods to a big moment
Hmm.
in culture, but it
Cottage
was a
core.
cottage core because you got to go to the cottage. If you have watched the show, you know. And it was such an entry point, but a really easy entry point to lean into a big culture moment happening right now in pop culture, but also into things that our sellers are creating. Buyers want to see this. They want to bring it into their home decor. Maybe they want to gift it to a friend that is really into the show and they're becoming like a huge fan of it. But a lot of those are being surfaced from like search listings. They're being surfaced from our different matching tools of seeing what actually gets brought up in some of those search results first. And had we not had some of those insights and toolings in place, we wouldn't have known this was the right moment or how to lean into it.
Right, right. Are you seeing a correlation as of late of like custom hockey jerseys with the rise in fame?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything hockey, anything cottagecore has had its like most like recent spikes. And even like a pretty similar thing with Wuthering Heights going on right now as well. And that upcoming movie, the very like romance, like romantical winter aspect and full feel with it. It's funny how some of these will just start to surface them on their own because that's what people are leaning into. And I think people in retail and e-commerce and even outside of that, let your audience tell you what they're into. Don't tell them what they're into. And I think that's where we get it wrong sometimes. And that's how AI can really help us. Is it informs us of what is going on with our buyers and with potential buyers.
That's great. And I think to your point earlier too, you look at like the younger generation, they're just so technologically savvy to what's being presented to them. So I want to, as we get towards the tail end of our conversation, I want to bookend it or go back to the original conversation, or part of the conversation you brought up was the book For Their Culture, right? And I do want to talk about things like cultural identity and marketing, right? What are your thoughts on just how, like, why does that kind of thing matter more? Like going back to like demographic labels and things like that. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And then I want to tap in like your thoughts on the Gen Z and Gen Alphas, right? But let's start there. Like cultural identity, what does it mean? And how are you looking at that?
I mean, it's everything. It's everything, especially when it comes to Gen Z and Alpha generations. I mean, they're looking at somebody's social media presence now as their brand identity. But older generations, the way we saw this came from TV, it came from film, it came from music, it came from the award shows and these really big moments in culture of how brands leaned into it. I think one example I see every year that does it really well, Hilton's been the sponsor of the Grammys for like over 70 or 80 years for however long the Grammys have been in inception for. And Hilton's been always associated with that. Why? Because the Beverly Hilton in LA, that's where all the celebrities stay. That's where all the people stay. Look at the Mark Hotel here in New York with the Met Gala. It's a pretty synonymous brand identity with both of these events and moments, and it's how people are associating the brands. The challenge we have as marketers, and I said this at the top, is that we are influencing behavior. We are actively telling people what they should buy, who they should listen to, where they should be shopping from, which social media sites should they be on. That's where influencers have come into play as well. They've become this new version of marketers that we've never seen before. And for generations like Gen Z and Alpha, that's their first resource. It's kind of flipped itself from where Gen X and Boomers have, and even versions of millennials as well, where they have gotten that information from. It was either word of mouth from friends or the things they saw on TV. Now influencers have come around and they create these pieces of content that make you feel like they're talking directly to you. They're your friend, they're your trusted resource. People are going to them first for these recommendations versus other people now. And Dr. Marcus Collins really speaks well about it when it comes to brands of like who's done it really well and brands who haven't done it so well. And I want to start with a brand who didn't do it so well a couple years ago. I will always remember it. It was a soda commercial with Kendall Jenner featured. It was a big Super Bowl ad, and it unfortunately fell very, very flat. And it was a moment where people wanted the execs really wanted to convey this message of like, we're creating a cultural moment to show we are all one and united, and we're going to use somebody with really big influence to do that. And it was like wrong influencer, wrong time, not wrong message, but wrong execution. And that is the biggest part now in cultural identity is how you are executing your messages and how you are leaning into it all.
Yeah, and I wonder with that particular case if they had a different, main character in the ad, how that would have been perceived. Because I definitely agree that there was a disconnect between what was going on there and who was the messenger, right? And it's a perfect case of like, don't kill the messenger, but It is what it is. So I think one of the other things that I found interesting in some of our previous dialogue, there's the Gen Zs of the world, and they're very ingrained with, like you were talking about, influencer marketing and things like that. But then you have this group coming up the pike, and it's the Gen Alphas, and they're adapting and engaging with media. The early signals is very different than the types of consumers profiles that you and I in particular and are growing up in the digital advertising landscape are accustomed to. Right? There's when you talk about technology, there's a massive offline renaissance. Right? At the same time, they're more comfortable buying online than ever before, but they're also very tapped into the fact that privacy is paramount to them, right? So these behaviors are I even read somewhere that they're buying more analog phones rather than adopting to like smartphones. They're enjoying a bit
Yeah.
more of that.
Well,
So
what's also come up on the rise is the recent sell of like CDs and DVDs. I
yeah.
joke you
Oh
not. Like
yeah.
I went to a
It's
store
insane.
recently and saw more CDs and DVDs than I did vinyl records. I was like, what's happening? This is such an inverse trend.
Uh-huh. Well, what they say, like culture is a pendulum, and what things that were old are new again, like that rings true. I think every 10 years or so I feel that way. And to your point, how as marketers can we begin to think about that trend? Like what do we then do in that moment? Like it might be too early to be thinking about them. I mean, I think Gen Alphas are born between like 2010 and 2024, so we might even be like obviously way too early, but the 2010 folks are coming up in age. What is the thinking towards like how are we going to begin to address those guys, both I guess with culture, right? Because that's going to be
Yeah.
even harder to tap into it.
We have to be the pendulum as well. I think we get really lost in the sauce of innovation and acceleration, and we think so technology first. And that's where the rise of AI has been like such a pro, but also a con and our hindrance at the same time. And it's not that we can't use it, we have to think about the ways to use it and the right time to use it. If right now we're seeing the rise of nostalgia in brand messages and in the way that people's behaviors are, then we as marketers need to adopt those into our messages and practices as well. And more often than not, we already have a product or we're already creating those things for people in those mixes. It's all about what you're surfacing to them. If you're telling people to invest more in crypto and spend more time on AI, but they're actually, to your point, not buying smartphones, they are using more analog devices, they are finding ways to spend time off screen, of course they're not going to resonate. Of course your brand metrics are not going to show lift. You're not going to see sales improve. You're not going to see the visit rates that you want from those groups of people you're trying to market to. It's just with like friends and everybody else. You got to meet people where they're at. And if right now we're on this pendulum swing of nostalgia, marketers need to go there as well. And we've seen different brands do that. I mean, some recent brands here, we were saying earlier in this conversation, have really leaned into 90s moments. I mean, the Olympics, such a massive moment in rhythm dance, decided for the theme for the Olympics was going to be 90s medleys. Every single team had to come and bring it with a 90s music medley of some sort of another. And that is such a powerful indicator of where sports are at and where culture is at, where music is at. I mean, you've got songs like from Stranger Things, for example, such a great show that really hits on the nostalgia aspects, particularly with music. Even with like Guardians of the Galaxy, I mean, that entire soundtrack is all nostalgia based. So if this is what's happening in pop culture, if this is what people are leaned into, why are marketers out there still not leaning into that and still understanding who is now dictating that culture? We can shape people's behaviors to a certain point, but if we are not in line with where the next generations are at, if we are not in line with where that pendulum swing is, the brand's just not going to survive. It's going to take massive hits or go under altogether.
Well said, my dear. This has been great. And I love that we looped it back to some of your initial themes that we talked about. So what I'd love to also do is give you a chance here. I know we talked about you being a podcaster and had great experience there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Edge Report? I know that's a new upcoming podcast you'll be launching soon.
Yes, it's launching later this year, and it's very much my own personal way that I'm leaning into culture. A fun fact about me is I was a competitive figure skater from the ages of 2 all the way to 22. I skated for the Ohio State University. As a synchronized figure skater, I was also an individual skater growing up. And after I left college and kind of left the sport, I was searching for places that were talking about figure skating, but my version of figure skating. Most people, and even like Olympics wise, you see one note of skating, which is the individual sport, pairs, dancing. What you don't see is synchronized skating, theatrical skating, skating for artistry, or show skating. And that is where I grew in the skating world. It is where all of my background was. And there were no places talking about it online as much, or if they were online, they were these really small subsets of people. So I said, you know what? I know there is a community out here. I'm a part of that community. And we're not talking about this community enough. So it's time to start that conversation. And me and my best friend, who was actually my choreographer growing up, Aubrey Brown, came up with the idea of the Edge Report. And the whole antithesis of the show is to, one, educate people on a side of skating that you're not seeing on TV, and two, to bring love and attention to the area of the sport that we love so much that goes underrepresented so much. I mean, hopefully in the next, 4 years, there's a really big Olympic bid going on for synchronized skating, and we're hoping we can kind of time with that to get people to know about what synchronized figure skating is, which is this massive team sport, 12 to 16 people on ice, sometimes even more, are creating these really beautiful, intricate programs on the ice that just don't get enough attention out there, as it should. So we're launching later this year. We're going to be bringing on a lot of different skating experts, some who you may know and love that are former Olympians and are former professional coaches and professional choreographers. Some are just other regular of the mill figure skaters like us, and some are also fans of the sport. And that's really the whole point. Is the Edge Report is our love letter to figure skating, and it's a love letter to what figure skating gave us, and it's our moment to give back to the community.
That's really great. I love that. Taking your passion and amplifying it. That's really cool. And I think, as you know, there's a seed tagger here who's kind of swam in those lanes in the past. So
Yes.
maybe you can get her on as well.
But we're already talking. We're already discussing.
I figured as much, which is great to hear. Okay, so we're at our final question or part of our conversation, and we usually end episodes with on theme, which is, if you had a superpower in ad tech, what would you say it would be?
I've thought about this question so much, and I have purposefully not listened to anybody else's answers as I've listened to this podcast to think about my own. And I think I already have that superpower. And my superpower is empathy, and the empathy I bring into marketing. And I think so often times more than not, we lose that aspect to it. We become so focused on the outcome. We forget about the moment, and we forget about how we make people feel. We forget about how they feel after they see that message, what they're doing with their behaviors. And if I can as a marketer lean in with empathy, understanding, caring, support, that's the best thing I can do for a brand. The money and the sales always follow when you have the right message and when you have the right tone. And if there are more marketers out there and more brands that can bring empathy into what they're doing, that's the secret sauce. That's what makes every ad tech hero a hero. And I think it's such a testament to all the people you've brought on the podcast to date. They're all leaning into the superpower that they already have inside of them, which is empathy.
I love that. That's a great way to end the chat today. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Obviously we'll be in touch, and I'm excited to see what's to come for you at Etsy and along with your podcast. But thank you again for being a part of this.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a fun conversation, and I can't wait to see all the amazing things you're going to do as well.
Appreciate that.